Welcome, listeners, to another installment of the Banquet Hall Podcast. Any new listeners, make sure you follow the podcast at Banquet Hall Pod. Share it with a friend, and y'all are in for a treat today. I am blessed to be joined by a good friend of mine, Salvador. Thank you for joining the podcast. How are you doing today, Sal?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you too. This is something that we kind of just not necessarily randomly put together, but I feel like we DM like I think it was like last week or a week and a half ago about a meme
Yeah.
just on my story. And for those of y'all on IG, y'all might have seen a meme talking about adult friendships or like, oh, like want to connect in 2026. And as we were like joking back and forth about how like, oh, I'm busy in 2027. How about 2030? I'm like, you know what? I want Sal on the podcast. Like we're connecting with people on the podcast. So very, very excited that you said yes. Very excited for people to hear your story. Sal mentioned before we started recording, this is his first time on a podcast. So I'm excited to be the first podcast host. And honestly, I'm gonna put it out there. It's gonna be the first of many throughout your career.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Of course. But the first question I usually start with all my guests, I think it's very important when we tell stories to share where we're coming from. So for our listeners at home, where are you from and what did you learn from where you grew up at?
Ooh, so where I'm from is always a fun question. I moved around a lot as a kid. So I was born here in San Diego. I lived here for like up until second grade. Then I moved to the DMV area and I was like in Northern Virginia for a couple of years. And then I went to El Paso, Texas, and I was there for like from like fourth grade up until freshman year of high school. And then I circled back to the Imperial Valley where all my family, like extended families from, that's where my parents were born and grew up. And I finished high school there. And then I came to UCSD for undergrad and then later grad school. So kind of made a giant full circle.
I know you went all across the nation and back. And for the listeners who might not be familiar with where the Imperial Valley is, where is Imperial Valley?
Oh, so it's like 2 hours southeast from San Diego. It's like the very southeast corner right before you get to like Arizona and Mexico. Very like farm town, dry, hot, lots of field workers, open spaces, canals. Smells like cows. Yeah. It's great, except the summertime. It's so hot.
Yeah, I can only imagine how it is now because I mean it's hot in San Diego, and just the further you get inland, like the hotter it gets.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, I enjoy the sun. Maybe that's why, because I'm kind of from the desert. I identify that way. I can do the sun way more than I can do the cold.
Ooh, I'm the exact opposite. I'd much rather have a cold day than a hot day.
Really?
Yeah, I don't even know what it is. Like obviously like I've grown up and lived in Southern California all my life, so it's never been like obviously the summer get kind of hot, but it's never been too hot, but I just always prefer like a nice little like 64-degree day. Like I don't know, it's just something about it. It's something weird about me though. I'm not saying people should like the cold, but I personally love it. But yeah, Virginia, Texas, Imperial Valley, what would you say that are some of the differences or the nuances? I know you were obviously like a young kid in some of these areas and still kind of coming of age, but what are some things that you kind of picked up along the way or just living in those different parts of the country?
You know, it was always interesting finding who I like identified with or like wanted to hang out with. And then even as a kid, there was like the back of my mind of like, you're gonna have to do this again. So I would get into this like habit of like who's my clique in each place. And that's why I think I established with like the area. So like in Virginia, there wasn't a lot of like Latino kids, but there was like a handful of like non-white kids. I remember it was like one other Mexican kid, a Puerto Rican kid, like one black kid, one Korean kid, one Indian kid, and we all sat at the same together, like table together. And for a while, I just figured it was like, oh, because these boys are cool, and then like now I look back and I'm like, oh, okay, so treated a little different. But when I've gone back to the DMV, I see it's like pretty mixed, especially because I spend more time in the city. So I feel like that was like specific to my time and like what was around me. Because the difference, I saw huge differences more between like El Paso and the Imperial Valley because they were both border towns with a lot of
Mm-hmm.
Latinos, but very different kinds of Latinos. Like just the regional culture was different. Like Texas versus California, plus like the Latino background is just
Mm-hmm.
was very different. So I feel like, and then each place I was there for a different part of my childhood. So I associate
Mm-hmm.
like elementary school with like Virginia, middle school with Texas, and then high school with California.
Yeah, and like you said, just that loop across the country and back. And you ended up at UC San Diego, one of many of my podcast guests who've gone to UCSD.
Yeah,
Uh, and you hold similar to me. We're double tridents now. Got the bachelor's,
yeah,
got the master's. We really like giving a lot of money back to our alma mater.
yeah, man. I mean, what can you say? We got to get that paper,
Hey, got to get
that
the
piece of
paper.
paper.
Yeah, that that little piece of paper they send in the envelope to your house, and it's like, this is this is my $100,000, huh?
Yeah, I'm staring at it right now. It's on my desk.
I think mine is like on my TV stand too. I haven't even framed it or anything yet. It's
Yeah,
like I'll get to it at some point.
yeah,
But you and I, we first crossed paths, if I'm not mistaken, Summer Bridge 2015,
yeah.
when you were a youngin, a very young Sal. So you were, or just to give our listeners some insight, Summer Bridge is a program targeted toward historically marginalized groups, and it's like a Bridgeway program. I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks right before you start your first year at UCSD. So Sal was one of the Summer Bridge students, and I was one of the counselors for the program. And so I guess the question I want to start with just that Summer Bridge experience was like, what was it like first stepping foot onto UCSD's environment as a Summer Bridge student, like coming into this new college environment and you're a part of this program, still kind of figure things out. What was that experience like for you?
I remember it was also the first time I saw UCSD, like really,
Mm.
because though I was close by, I kind of just went off of the recognition for choosing to go there. So I hadn't toured the place or anything. Uh, so we pulled up in that Revel parking lot, and everyone's unloading and stuff. But I didn't even know it was like this tiny corner of the school. I was like, all right, cool. Doesn't look like the rest of the campus, right? Everything's all hodgepodge. And so walking up, there's all these tents, and I'm seeing all these like other people that are like varying ethnicities, like backgrounds that like some look like me, some don't look like me, not a lot of white people. And I'm like, all right, this is great. It's ran by not a lot of white people. Like, it's like, all right, cool. People are talking like me, right? Kind of meeting people in line, excited to like figure out where we go. And then I got through pretty quick. And I remember walking through the building and Andre was like escorting somewhere else. And so I stopped him and I'm asked like where I go. And he was like, oh, you're one of my students. And like gave me the biggest smile. And I remember like, cool. And just like walking into this room and then seeing other people and their families. And like nobody was quite saying hi. Like they're like waving, but like busy setting up.
Yeah.
And I feel like everyone was in their same space as like, this is different because it's not quite college, but like we also know things count for college. Like I guess we were just in the blind, so we're all kind of like nervous and like yeah. But
Yeah.
I remember being pretty excited, like feeling good walking in because of Oasis. That was a good first one. Like I never did a campus tour, thankfully.
Yeah, I definitely think you get a completely different introductory to UCSD when you're going through a program like Summer Bridge. And like you said, there's like so many diverse people that you're interacting with. And like you had a Black ATC and you had like other like marginalized groups that you're with. And that's really cool that Andre was your counselor. So you had the second best ATC of Summer Bridge 2015 because I have to take the crown because this is my own podcast, but I do also want to be able to give Andre some flowers on this episode too. So, what would you say was some of the things that you learned from Andre as your Summer Bridge counselor, if you remember?
Oof. I feel like I learned a lot of like the reality of being a student, like kind of like a jump cut to like it's not all nice and there's like high expectations, but also like caring about yourself. Like I'm sure for a lot of Summer Bridge people, like those one-to-ones were like really great times to like just have another person like reflect with you and talk,
Hmm.
so just like making sure that you're good at the end of the day, like you're a student, it's like not your whole identity. um and like the general just like opening up to like new ideas. I felt like I had never been to a point like challenged to like, hey, you don't understand this, just like listen.
Mm.
And I feel like that was really easy to do because the way Andre would present things, and I think our group meetings too with the other guys, like we got to bond, and that was like helpful of like, okay, there's other guys here who are also learning and unlearning the same things. So like, yeah, just opening up.
Yeah, and I mean I think that's very important to have like someone who's been through the college experience for a couple of years, just be able to give you that real insight. And I think that's why programs like Summer Bridge are so important, because you have groups of marginalized experiences and communities who are going to be having not the same college experience, but they're all going to be experiencing UCSD from this lens of like a diverse
Right.
background. And like you mentioned, like you've been in towns where people look exactly like you've been in areas where you're meeting a lot of different people. So kind of coming into Summer Bridge, I feel like is a nice incubator, for lack of a better word, of just like a lot of people all, like you said, learning the similar things, figuring out the transition to UCSD. And so, yeah, you're one of many people that I got to encounter at Summer Bridge. And now that you all are actual adults, I feel like sometimes it's still weird because we met y'all when y'all was like 17, 18. Now y'all in y'all
Yeah.
20s and fully established into who you want to be and figuring out who you want to become. So it's pretty cool to see, honestly.
Honestly, what's crazy is when we started, we saw y'all who are like 2 years older than us, right? Like not even that much older. We saw y'all as like these adults now, like, oh, they got their shit together, they rock in school, they doing all this. And then like some of us went on to be ATCs later and we were like, oh nah.
It's like no, we was all still figuring it out too. We was still transitioning and all that. And it's funny because from our perspective too, it's like, oh, look at these kids coming to this
Yeah.
college campus. Meanwhile, like you said, we're like 2 years older than you.
Yeah. We just went to 2 years of heavy academia. We're like, we've been through it.
That's real though. You go through 2 years of college, you feel like you done aged like 5 or 10 years. But I wanted to get into kind of like your educational background. We mentioned that you're double degreed up at UCSD.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk to our listeners about, let's start with your bachelor's and then into what led you to get your MFA.
Yeah, so I got my bachelor's in ICAM, which stands for Interdisciplinary Computer and Arts Major, um, which is just a very fancy name for like music production and
Mm,
recording techniques. Um, I guess they left it open because there used to be some like cross collaboration with the visual arts department.
mhm,
All I know is they've kind of rebuilt that system. So I know the major still exists, but it might mean something different now.
mhm,
Um, but I was really into music production and recording, um, into it in the sense like I hadn't really done it in high school, but I was really into music and I wanted to get into like that side of music. So I chose UCSD, applied to different places across the country, and UCSD ended up being the best fit. And it was great because the music department, though the program was small, the PhD program was like has like one of the best like computer music programs in the world or something like that. So
mm.
the trickle down funding actually got to the undergrad level. And because there's only so much of us, like it could get spread pretty well. So we had really nice resources.
Mm.
So I loved it there at UCSD. I had access to like really nice studios and stuff. Um, my degree, as you know, was a bunch of GEs because of UCSD, a lot of like art history and theory type stuff, and then the rest was like recording practices like in a
Mm.
studio working with grad students at times. um and yeah, so I did that for a while, and I actually took, it was a time where part of my degrees, my degree plan, it was like 10 classes and choose 5 to take, like,
Mhm.
so there's one theater class that said sound design, and part of me was like, that could be useful for like music, like making sound effects is what I thought it was going to be. So on a whim I took it, and then I did really well, kind of had a knack for it, probably because this background with like the tech that I had different understanding than other theater students who maybe didn't have the tech.
Hmm.
Uh, and I was encouraged by my TA who was a grad student at that time. And then I got to assist on a couple plays. And then I did one, technically two full plays before I graduated. And so that kind of started the itch for sound design and theater. Um, yeah, so that was undergrad. Should I go on to MFA?
Yeah, let's go ahead. What led you to get your MFA?
Uh, yeah, so I finished this degree and I was looking to be recording and stuff. Getting into a studio is hard unless you like move to LA and you're willing to do like very little pay, like
Hmm.
basically go back to the bottom again. And I was like, okay, but I have like I can already make stuff. Like I'm ready to like do more. uh and so I got an AV job at a hotel right across the street from UCSD. And I was doing like corporate AV. Uh, and I was chilling doing that. And then after a while, I just got so bored because I wasn't making any content or like doing anything musical. It was all like work retreats were happening. So I'd put up giant projection screens and I had to like dress nice, like tucked in shirt, but I was also lifting like big speakers and sweating.
Mm.
And I
Dress
was,
codes are interesting.
yeah, it was ridiculous. I had to look like I was working at this fancy hotel, but I'm like outside hanging lights is like I look gross because I'm sweating through
Yeah.
like a dress shirt. So I was like miserable. I was like, okay, I know I can do more. Um, and then I was still finishing one last class at UCSD because I took a coding class that I technically failed once,
Hmm.
took two W's on, dropped another two times. Like could not finish this last class from my undergrad degree. Um, was taking it online, so I was still technically a student. So the grad program asked if I wanted to sound design a show or like help program a show. I did that. It was great. And then some of the grad students like kind of put it in my head, like, have you thought about going to school? Like, and I was like, I don't know. I don't want to pay for school. That was my big thing.
It's a
I also
good thing.
didn't know. Yeah, I also didn't know what I wanted to do, but I did know I wanted out of the AV business. Uh, and then a director came up to me and was like, it's well, UCSD's their grad program is free. Um, so I was like, oh, that changes things a lot. Um, and I was like, okay, I don't know how I'll pay for like myself during the time of grad school, but I know that the tuition is free, so like there's something there. So I applied last second, like a day before the application was due. Just we'll see if this works out. And then I waited like 3 months, heard nothing as I was doing this AV job, still trying to figure out like worse and worse, getting like I want to get out of here, but I also
Hmm.
need money and stuff. And then I got into grad school and I found out too that they give me a TA ship, so I would also get like pay.
Oh,
I
nice.
was like, okay, so I could full time a student and just worry about it. Cool. So I jumped out of AV very quickly and went into that, which was great because I found out right when they furloughed everyone for the pandemic.
Oof. Yeah. What a time we live in.
Yeah,
But that's really exciting. And I'm not sure. Are you a first generation college grad?
yeah, yeah.
So what did that feel like for you? Like just like you finished UCSD one time, you get into grad school, and now you have your master's. Like what does that feel like to be able to say like you have two degrees, like as a first gen student?
It's kind of wild.
I agree.
like, like I feel like I often tend to be like, okay, great. Like, what's next? Uh, and every now and then I do reflect on like, oh shit, wait, I did just graduate second time. Like I've been in school for like 8 years straight.
Yeah.
But not only that, but like, damn, through all the figuring it out and you know, like you said, first gen, like my parents were there supportive and stuff, but it was like we were figuring things out together, legal things, payment things of like,
Hmm.
I don't know. But you know, thankfully they believed in me and like are very much for education as most POC families are. uh, so they encouraged me through it, but it's very nice to sit back and reflect and like think go me
Yeah.
because it was great. And I love the fact that it's like my sister low key was like thinking about going to grad school. I have a cousin that's gone, like another one that's currently going in the DMV area. So it's like not just me, but like my generation, like my
Hmm.
cousins as well, like raising to professionalism altogether. Yeah, it's great because it's like we all get to celebrate together and continue going.
Yeah, it's such a powerful thing. I think that that's one of the things I loved most about just getting to know different people from diverse backgrounds at UCSD and just in life, because it's like everybody has a story to tell about, like, oh, like my parents sacrificed X, Y, and Z to get me here, or we didn't know how we were going to pay for X, Y, and Z, but they want to make sure that I got to college and that I made my way through. And yeah, just I wanted to ask you about that because I think the more that we really take the time to sit and affirm the fact that of all that we've accomplished and at such a young age too, it's like some of our ancestors' wildest dreams is that we would be getting 2 degrees from an institution like UCSD, and here we are today.
Yeah, working professionals under 30, like chilling. Yeah,
And chilling.
it's
The most important part, chilling.
yeah, like honestly chilling. Like don't get me wrong, we all get stressed and anxious, but
Yeah.
like it is not the position my parents got to be in, you know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing is like, especially because I'm an artist, like they let me do art. Like that's a big fear of like you're gonna go get a degree and but it's gonna be an art one. So I had to double down with MFA. Like I'm serious, I swear.
Yeah, you got to prove yourself and make sure they know, like, no, like this is real, this is worth it, this is something I'm passionate about and want to succeed in.
Yeah, definitely. And it is. And it was a great program. I definitely enjoyed the grad program way more than the undergrad program at UCSD.
And what were some things that made you appreciate and or enjoy it more than the bachelor's?
I think, of course, there's like more resources. I think no tuition was, I mean, a great reason to go in general.
Absolutely.
Um, Even though the pay like wasn't great for the amount of work we were doing as TAs, because we would often just lecture, like we would just be the professor for all intents and
Mm.
purposes. uh like the just getting paid for that. So it was like, okay, like I was taken care of. It's a smaller program, so a lot more attention. Like there's one sound person per year, one lighting person per year, sometimes two, but that means like a professor has 4 students, maybe max. Like so very, very specific. Like I got help was always within reach, which was great. We are also partnered with the La Jolla Playhouse. They're on our grounds. I'm not quite sure how the
Mm.
partnership really works, but it's like a great house to like get connections with. And like because I was a student there and got to do work and little jobs across the street with them, like I already have like a great setup leaving. So that was also like it was a good like push forward, which is what I wanted grad school to do, not just uh like I've heard other schools you get to do one show maybe your whole MFA,
Mm.
like 2 years there, where I got to do like three. There's one year I did 6, but like
Oh
shows a
wow.
year. Yeah. I also had such a small resume that I was like trying to grind things out to stack it because I needed help and I was, trying to use the resources that this program gave me, which in undergrad it felt like I was begging more and like people were like, go here, go here, go here. And then I don't need the help anymore because the time's passed or whatever.
That's cool that you were able to get so much practical experience. Do you feel like there are any particular shows or productions that stand out as like favorites, or one that were like interesting to work on, or that you gained a lot of it, like, I don't know, experience from?
Yeah, I think well, not the first show. The first show I did there was a Zoom show. So it was really
Mm.
hard to juggle sound. But because of that, the show after that was an audio play. So no visuals, we just recorded it. And so I got to go full like engineer mode and like we got nice mics for the actors. So we were recording like on their computers, but like communicating through Zoom and they would send me things. And so it was like this giant, like 45-minute long play, but I mixed the whole thing. So it was like cool that I had full control over things. And there were sound effects. Like there's a moment where the guy's in the kitchen. So I'd record myself like doing Foley, like pulling out like a chopping block and a knife and some like lettuce or stuff and like chopping things and like listening to the audio and like running around my kitchen doing things in time. So I got to like do a bunch of crazy stuff, and it was great because since we were online that first year due to COVID, it really got me to like stretch my creativity in a time where the show before, because we were on Zoom, we couldn't really play sound effects. We couldn't really even level everybody's mics. So it was just kind of like, I think it sounds good. And we got like one song in there, and that was like a whole hurdle. So it was a great intro to like, this is what I can do in grad school.
No, absolutely. And I feel like, at least speaking for myself, I feel like sound design is an, I don't know if I want to say underappreciated or just a underserved portion of the arts in terms of people's knowledge about what all goes into sound design. I think that like
Yeah.
everybody likes listening to music, everybody likes watching movies, but I don't feel like people too often think about just all the teams of people and the audio engineers and the people that are putting in work to make it sound like what's happening is happening, where it's happening at the volume it needs to happen at. Um, it's just so interesting. And as for myself, like I've been really interested in film production lately, and I've been
Mm.
watching like plenty of videos of like how people make it sound like somebody's walking in the snow on film. Because I think as like a child, when I think of film, like yeah, they just record and they hear the sound of the
Right. Yeah.
footsteps, but there's so many different layers to it. So I would say like if you had to, I don't know if you what the question within that is, but if you had to let people know like what sound design entails, or like who you are as an artist with regard to sound design, like what does it mean to be a sound designer?
Yeah. So I think so my thesis was on the sound of movement. That was the title of it. And so I relate sound to movement a lot and what it can do. And so this is mainly through like a theater lens, but I think some of the ideas apply to like other platforms. Um, Sound can sometimes just supplement a scene, like be the background, let us know we're in a certain place or time. And I think that's where it starts. But I think sound can also be like another character in the room. Um, like I've done a horror show where we're using like loud sound and quiet sound and creepy sounds and like relaxing sounds to like change the energy in the room.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in a horror movie when like the creepy underscoring starts or you hear like the violins come in,
Mm-hmm.
you're getting
Something's about to
primed,
happen.
right? Yeah. Or nothing happens and then it's quiet and then a jump scare, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's all like a rhythm to it, it's like movement within the scene, like that breath, that like even that silence before like the between the fake out and the real scare is like timed. I bet you someone
Mm-hmm.
tried like half a second more, half a second less, like all those little details. Cause like, I don't know, humans are very rhythmic and like, we're meant to move and have rhythm within us. And so I think there's an understanding of how things work. And that's why like there's kind of a shtick to each genre, is because as humans, we just know there's like a movement there. And so I like being able to figure out what that movement is, create it, change it, fake people out with it. Um, like in a play, I get to do a lot of like uh localized sound. So if I have a bunch of speakers, I can play sound out of one area. And like in this horror show, we were trying to do it like a horror film. So if I played it on the left side, people would look that way, and someone could like run up in the dark on the other side
Mm-hmm.
and then play a sound on the right. They look back and then it's now a jump scare because they didn't see like this movement. So it's also like, that's why I say it's like another character of like I can kind of control where you're looking, even though it's auditory. Um, and I could definitely nerd about this like for such a long time.
I
Um,
love it.
but it really is like movement. That's how I see it. Is like even though it's sonic, it kind of works as a visual element.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so cool. And one of the reasons why I was excited to have this conversation with you, because I'm really interested in stuff like that when it comes to just productions and how things come on. Because the audience that's coming to see a play, like they're like, oh, I'm gonna sit here for X amount of time, watch this play. They're not thinking just how many different people and how many different micro decisions are made to give them the experience that they're experiencing. Because, like you said, the rhythm of the sound, when the sound is happening, where is it coming from? And I feel like sound design and that form of art even aligns with my background in coxsci, because
Mhm.
when we're learning about the auditory like systems in the brain and how we're perceiving sound, those are the similar things that we're talking about, like how long a sound is happening and when is it making your brain stimulate. So I love seeing people nerd out about the stuff that they're passionate about. It's the coolest thing in the world to me. And I think that or not, I think when I become a famous Hollywood screenwriter and film production, I'm gonna have to hire you as my director of sound on the set.
I got you. I'll be there.
Awesome. I appreciate that. But I want to get into Suavecito sound design and just how you've turned your academic passions and just things that you're passionate about learning about and things you've become an expert about to create your own art, to create your own platforms. And so I want to start by just talking about like what made you want to create your Suavecito sound design.
Yeah, I think I had always been like into music or sound growing up. Like started by playing drums when I was really little, and then violin. I was in bands and stuff, did dance, so I got my hands through a lot of things. And then you heard how like I got into theatrical sound design. So I think it was I wanted to stay like general enough, and so that's why I classify myself as like a sound designer, so I can kind of keep my hands in multiple pots, but also like the connection between it all. Um, yeah.
I love
um,
that.
yeah, the name Suavecito comes from a hair gel that I used to use a lot in like high school. And during a dance competition, a friend saw I was using that. And so he's like, hey, Suavecito. And like it became like a joke within the group where they'd refer to me as Suavecito. And then the first dance mix I made was like for a performance. I added like a Suavecito, like, and then it just stuck and it's always been around. And yeah.
Hey, I rock with it. I love it. I definitely didn't know that it came from hair products, so that's really cool to hear. That's so cool. But I think the first time I was introduced to you as a sound designer was when Andre came out with his project, and I
Mhm.
listened to like Capitalism Survival Anthem, and he was like, "Oh, Sal mixed this." I was like, "Wait, Sal did this?" I was like, "Oh, this is hard." So I think what I'm curious just hearing your perspective on is like, what was it like to be able to collaborate on your former academic transition counselor
Mhm.
and like put together this project with him and be able to, yeah, just have a bop, like the song's fire.
Yeah, I think it was, I mean, it was so fun because it was like, I never really like collaborated with anyone before. So it was part of it was like, okay, how do I work with another like musician? And like I was like just getting into like making beats and things. And I think I made uh Sandman the beat first. I made this like loop. I was messing around and I was like, you know what? Like this is what Andre would do. Like this is some Andre shit. And so I like exported it and I sent it to him and I was like, oh, what you think? And he was like immediately like, oh, I got you. I got you. Came back with some like lyrics. I like, fit them in there. And like afterwards, I think that's when the sound design came in, is there's things like, because I just sent him the beat with no context of like what the song was going to be about. Then he give me back these lyrics and I was like, okay, gotcha. These are the topics that we're talking about. This is his viewpoint. Like I got to start processing like uh he says uh oh, I shouldn't be forgetting the words. uh, he refers to uh knocking someone out is what I was getting to, like boxing. So I got to throw in like the little like knockout bell, like ding ding. Uh
Oh,
and
I
throw in
remember
these,
that.
yeah, like these little cuts, like if you would take like a breath, like add some like space in between, and kind of like rework my original deal with now this context that he gave me. Uh, so it was just super fun to like, I just made something and he put this whole like, this is what we're gonna do with it. And then to like rework that a little bit and put that out was great. And then that amazing video that came to accompany it, which was like super like amazingly shot. Like the animation was great on it, like really continues the story.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, and it was awesome that it was just like three of us who like came together with what we knew, made something super great, super high quality too. Like I used that to get into grad school as a resume. This
Oh wow.
I still use it on my resume. Like it's on my website, like front, like right there at the top of my music page. Uh, and it was just an idea and some vibes and commitment and passion to the work and putting stuff out there was great. And then with people that I really like.
Crown Ellen, Bay Area, a proud sponsor of the Banquet Hall podcast. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, I think that's honestly what it's all about. Like, as creatives, as artists, like being able to do stuff that we love to do, things that we're passionate about, and do it with people who we appreciate, who we like, who we've grown up with. Like, that's honestly like what all of this is about for me, which is why I
Mhm.
wanted to have you on the podcast. Just wanted to have people that's like, yeah, like I don't want to just, I don't, my goal as a podcaster isn't to be on a red carpet interviewing celebrities. Like, I would love to, don't get me wrong, but I want people to hear these types of stories and
Mm.
how these things are created. Because I was even talking to Andre last night about the concept of the zeitgeist and how all the things that we're doing and all the moments that we're taking to create content, to create music, to create art. Like, when you look back at the finished product, like, yes, maybe somebody just downloads Salmon on Spotify or whatever and they play that song, but we know the story of how that was
Yeah.
created and what those moments were like. And it's just so powerful.
Yeah. It's like, yeah. And to be able to put it on Spotify, which is great too, is just like, that feels very confirming as like an artist, you know, I think to all of us of like, yeah, I got a song out.
Exactly. And I wanted to also, as I was looking at your website preparing for this episode, I came across the Dance Nation as well that you have. So wanted
Oh
to give
yeah.
you a little bit of time to talk about Dance Nation as well.
Yeah. So Dance Nation is a play that was done at UCSD. Um, and the director, Emily, who I'm good friends with, really wanted me to work on it because it was her thesis show. But I was already working on another show and would have been too much. And so we kind of pitched the idea of what if we have first year sound designer come in, do it, and I'll kind of mentor her, but I'll be the composer because the reason she wanted me on the show was to like compose some music. So I was like, I'll still do the compositions, which is probably what I realized like it's a whole other job. um, so I took a swing at just composing and not sound designing for a show because I don't have a very strong composition background, but I wanted to
Hmm.
test my luck and like I understood theater and what they needed, and thankfully there's no lyrics needed because it would be happening like under some words at times, so I didn't have to worry about lyrics. So I made this 5-song EP for this play, um, and I started by like, what if I wrote songs, not like underscoring the play, but just and then see if we can like fit it in there and how it works. Um, so I started with just like a bunch of drafts of all these things, and it got to a point where it's like, oh, I have like these 5 songs, even though they're kind of short, they're like tell something. So why not I just like fully produce that and share?
Mm.
And the people who work on the show especially really love it because now they can always go back and like listen to it and get memories because you know people get very attached to shows.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so cool just to be able to produce art and see people's emotional connection to it, or
Mm-hmm.
types of things that it makes them bring up. One more question I wanted to ask with regard to sound design. I think that obviously when people are making instrumentals, when they're making beats and whatnot, they usually have some type of influences or genres of music they might try to not necessarily mimic, but like pay a homage to. So what are some of your influences when you think of like sound design?
Mm. That's a fun one because like genre wise, I definitely come from like I think I pull elements that I need for like the mood based off of like the different time like places I played music at and like points in my life. So
Hmm.
like I was in orchestra a lot. So like sometimes I feel like we need strings. So I usually my influence is like the the kind of orchestra I learned, and like me playing violin and starting from there. I was in like a church like praise and worship group, and I'd play like guitar, and it was kind of more like 4-chord stuff. So like bedroom pop, like very Ed Sheeran sounding.
Yeah.
So I pull influence from there when I need to. I also did a lot of like, I was into pop punk a lot growing up. So that's where like my like pop punk and like metal side comes from. Was also into EDM. So I feel like I don't have one genre or like influence, but I have very specific connections to genres that I like to like, oh, okay, I associate this genre with this mood, and I like using that. But I also really like combining genres and making things a new context by changing genres. And so like artist wise, like that's why I like Childish Gambino, because like, sorry, his variety. I'm a big Bad Bunny fan for multiple reasons, but he has a lot of hits that are like in different genres with or without people of that genre. You know, like I really like the switch up, like Lil Uzi's newest album. Like I loved it so much. Some people are like, it's not really like hip hop and stuff. I'm like, that's why it's dope. Like it's different, you know, like it's creating new stuff. So I really strive to do that. And like maybe you've heard this genre a little bit, but I'm kind of doing something different with it. And those choices are all made on like what the mood and context is.
Do you feel like studying sound design and being a sound designer has influenced the way you listen to music now? Like, as an example, I feel like now that I've been like really into film and studying film a lot more, I don't watch movies the same. Like, I feel like my brain is just always just like, ooh, I like how they did that, or ooh, look at that cut, or I wonder if they did like a dolly zoom here. So I'm just curious how like your listening to music has changed, or just listening to sound in general.
Yeah, I think during undergrad, I started learning terminology and effects in music production specifically. So I would start listening to music a lot more consciously. Like I think in high school, I actually adapted like a new album. I have to listen to it all the way through, like no shuffle. Like it is one whole piece, right? And like that's a religious rule of mine. I won't listen to it. Like if a single's on in the car, fine, whatever. But like I'm not gonna shuffle around. No, gotta listen to it. And where was I going with this? And so that was just undergrad. And then grad school, I started learning about like greater art, not greater as in like better, as in like my scope was bigger. Like I was taught visual things, even though I was like a sound designer. We'd learn general like art history. And that's when it really started opening up. And then when I started getting glimpses into like acting classes and working with people in the different fields and seeing what they're paying attention to now. And I was actually just talking about this with my girlfriend like last week. We saw a movie or a couple weeks ago, and it was like, now we pay attention to everything, like the music, like the acting, like, and it's very quick to be like, that was an interesting like writer's choice. Like, why'd they write the line like that? I'm like, oh, that actor broke right there, or like they're improvising right here, or like, oh, this is such great, or like this has got to be such a weird scene to like film. Like all those things. It's like, yeah, it's like hyper analytical, where sometimes I have to like pep talk myself before something and be like, just enjoy it as a consumer. Like don't think. Like the new Spider-Man movie, I had to like constantly be like, okay, just embrace it, just watch. Like don't think. Yeah, and it gets harder and harder, especially when people are like, yo, check this out, and then I instantly start doing it. I'm like, no. Let it go.
Yeah, I definitely really relate to what you just said, because there's times where I'm like, okay, brains off. I'm watching this movie for enjoyment. I'm not here to be a critic of it. I'm here to just consume media like your average citizen. But then there's always that one point where I'm like, ooh, like I wonder why the writer made that choice, or it's just those little things. So it's just really cool to talk to other artists and just see like where your gears start turning for similar things.
Yeah. It's also, I think the flip side of that is also when you know like, oh, that animation scene had to have been crazy, or like when your mind is blown of like, how did they get that image? Like you think a little deeper of like, and the appreciation for like what they're doing is like, oh, like a sound will shoot across the space, and I'm like, what was that? I gotta know. And I'll find myself looking up like who was the sound designer after the movie, like what houses worked on it and stuff. So it's like a double-edged sword where it's like I can't always enjoy things, but sometimes I pick on some like really, really special things.
Mm. Have you seen the latest Mission Impossible movie or any other Mission Impossible movies?
Yes, but not the latest one. I've seen a few of them.
So with the latest one, there's a scene that takes place in a desert, and I saw it in like Dolby Digital at the theater. And when I tell you, like I felt like I was in a sandstorm, I literally was like, I need to know who was the sound designer for this movie. Like this,
Yeah.
it was like one of the most perfect uses of sound design in a scene in a movie I'd ever experienced. Like especially with the Dolby Atmos sound, I just felt like I was like, wow, like they did this.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's the way things are changing right now with like tech and like immersive stuff is great.
Yeah, it makes for a great experience. One of the things I want to make sure that we had some space to talk about, just this is like one of the newest things in your life. You recently got an award, the Princess Grace
Yeah.
Award. We had scheduled the podcast episode, and I think maybe 2 days ago, I was like, oh shit, like Sal just got an award. Like, I can't wait to just hear more about it. Like, I didn't even click the post. I didn't want to read anything. I just want to hear from you. So, what is this award, and how did it feel to receive it?
So the Princess Grace Award, Princess Grace Foundation is it's a grant and like community. So I had to do this whole application process. And it's a community of like recognized artists of different backgrounds, different fields. Like there's also film and choreography. And it's a recognition of work, which is extremely, I'm super honored and excited. It's national recognition, so it kind of gets my name out there a little bit more. It's a great grant, which helps me push my career forward, to just continue making art. But the community is full of like highly sought after designers currently working in the field. Like multiple, like many of them have like Tonys. Like they are the people that I want to be like working with and striving to be with. They're the ones leading the game right now. So a lot of them are part of this community, and so now I'm welcomed in and able to like reach out for like questions, or just like I didn't know about this award, like pre-theater. I didn't know about this award until my school told me they were going to nominate me for it, and I had to start doing the application. But it generally, what it feels like is a giant stamp of like, I know, like I am able and do good work. Like, please, like work with me, try me out. Like it's kind of like you may be unsure, but like this behind me kind of makes some people take the chance. Like you're sure. So it's a great honor. I'm sure like these UCSD was celebrating me. Lots of friends were congratulating me. I was extremely happy to win. I was very nervous. It was a huge application. It was like the school had to like approve like that they were putting me in for it. I had to get like letters of recommendations. I had to make like reels, written word statements with like limited word amounts. So I had to like, there's a lot of back and forth with my professors of like, can you check this writing and like these multiple statements. And so I really wanted it. Not only for just, it's a great recognition. The money was really gonna like help with like certain gear, and like I can take some next steps forward. Like I have a couple projects I haven't been able to do because either I'm busy working so I can, survive, or I don't have like funds to like take the next step, or like, well, I don't want to invest this thing and then not work on it for the next 2 weeks. Like, so it allows me to like do that, and then I can continue promoting myself or like doing the work I want to do, as well as continuing making all these connections with other people.
That's lovely. Well, I want to be not the first, right, but one of many people to congratulate you. And I'm really happy to hear that you really were able to take that in, and all the hard work that you've been doing to get affirmed in that way. And yeah, I think that artists need to be recognized for the work that we're doing. So I'm just really happy that you got that recognition, and first of many awards. I'm gonna manifest that on the podcast. I'm looking forward to just seeing how you continue to grow and blossom. But yeah, when I was just scrolling through Instagram stories and I saw that, I'm like, congrats to Sal. Like what's just hearing people that you we started the podcast, seeing you first day at UCSD all the way to now, and it's all up for here. So congratulations once again on the Princess Grace Award. That's huge.
Thank you. It means so much. But it's also like y'all and all the people I've met are like part of that too. And I like, some people are always like, no, that's you. But it really is like all the people that I've met and like along the way who've like made me be the person I am essentially and affected that. Is like, I definitely reflect on all those people with this recognition, because I feel like I definitely take influence from lots of my like surrounding and the people I surround myself with.
I love that. I love that so much. I'm having a blast this episode. We've talked about a lot, but one thing that I wanted to make sure that we had space to talk about as well. I know that your identities are very important in your craft as an artist and in what you do, and another way that you express yourself in art is through dance. And I know that Latin dance is something that's very important to you. So how and when did you get started with dance, and when did dance enter your life?
Ooh, dance. So I just moved to the Imperial Valley, 10th grade, and still like the new kid for a little bit, learning how different everybody was, different kind of border town. We were in assembly like the first couple of days of school, and the Latin dance club comes out and performs. And I was like I've heard of these dances, but like I didn't know people like my age were dancing it. And these people were like really good. I was like, that's sick. I want to learn how to do that. But I was like too shy. And so I didn't start until next year, 11th grade. And I was like, okay, I know enough people. I feel more comfortable because I hadn't danced before. So I went and tried it out. I really liked how it brought me closer to my culture. I actually didn't really learn Spanish until high school. And a big part of that was like dancing. Like, okay, I'd learn the song. So I'd go home, listen to the music, look up lyrics, like learn that way. I'd be singing along by like the end of the week to the music I was dancing to. A lot of people in the club also were like bilingual, so we spoke a lot of Spanish or like Spanglish. So some of my best friends were in the group too, so I did that for a bit. And then I got to UCSD. I didn't want to let it go because I was just like, hey, I'm starting to get good at this, having a lot of fun. And there was a class that the dance department offered, but it was only like you had to be a junior or senior, one of those like classes. So I emailed the professor, like, I assumed it wasn't because like of a credit or thing. It was just like, I don't know, skill level or something.
Yeah,
so I just emailed
experience or something.
Yeah. So I emailed and asked and said like, hey, I did in high school. Can I join? He's like, yeah, come. So me and another friend went, and we did that for a while. And because I had some background and this was a beginner class, I was like doing pretty nicely. So that teacher was really like a nice mentor in terms of dance and would like kind of push me forward. Eventually he wanted to start like a club and a team. And I think because I knew what it meant to go from like 2 left feet to like being able to show someone a step, even if it was a simple step, I like rose to the occasion of like learning to teach a little bit. And basically I was like learning these basic patterns that I would then reteach like to the club when we'd have lessons, because I realized like, though it took me like 1 lesson to learn it, this whole thing, it's going to take a lot longer for like this beginner club that I was helping teach. So I was just recycle what I was learning and like condense it and reteach it to these other people. And so that helped like foster a community within like Latin dance. And so I just like, it was a good thing to stick around. Of like, I was helping people were teaching me new stuff. I was meeting lots of people, dancing, feeling connected to my culture, still like practicing my Spanish. And though it felt like a sidestep from what I was doing academically, it was one great exercise and like a breath of like not thinking about academia. But I feel like I was also still thinking as like a musician in terms of dancing, and I was like, oh, I do this in dance and music, this would make sense to happen. Or like, how do I think about music as a dancer? So how do I think about the dancers when I'm a musician? So it ended up still being like relevant, or I made it become relevant. and that only like further solidified like my love for it and like my like belief of its necessity. Um, so I was like teaching this club, and then we were on a team for a little bit. And then I had to start focusing on like graduating. So I kind of stepped down from the club and take some space. And so now every now and then I'll do social dancing, go for a class. Haven't done it as much, but I definitely still consider myself a dancer. Like I have that in my bio. It's definitely incorporated in the way I think about my sound design.
Yeah, and I think just hearing you talk about it, it really shows like of course you're still a dancer. Like it's a passion of yours. It's how you're thinking. It's I'm sure even like some of the decisions you make as a sound designer can be influenced by like just dances and experience you've had with dance too. So that was really inspirational just to hear you talk through that journey, because I think that when we really start to sit down and unpack the things that we do, the things that we're passionate about, you could just see like just how intertwined a lot of our passions are. So that's really exciting.
Thanks. Yeah.
So rounding out towards the end of the podcast, just some quick hitter questions. First, where can people find you and how can they support you?
Oh, I'm in the SoCal area, so I'm sound designing between San Diego and LA. Yeah, I say general SoCal because I'm between like both cities. You can also find me on Instagram, suavecito_sound design. It's like I post a lot of my shows there. I use my story a lot for like things that I'm working. Sometimes I'll post snippets of like random weird sounds that I'll be making, as well as my website, suavecito.design. There you can see like all my archive stuff, like music. It gives you links to Spotify, SoundCloud, everything from there. That's really the hub of everything. My contact info is also on there. And it's also a great place to like check out who I am as an artist and my work.
Perfect. And then what did you take away from this episode, and what do you hope our listeners take away from this episode?
What I take away? I gotta think of something good.
Oh yeah, take your time.
That everyone's like more connected than we think. Like people overlap, and I think can talk a lot about things. Like you never know what random thing you have in common with someone that could like potentially lead to long, fruitful conversation and like learning. You know, even if it's a minuscule one, like you sharing with me about video production, like that's great because I'm a sound person. I'm on the other end. Now I know someone else to call for. Like, hey, I have a question here. Do you have any resources about this? Like, and now we can geek out if we ever see movies. If you ever want to talk about the cuts in a movies, I'll probably like, I'm into that. Yeah.
Yeah, I could tell you was into that because I think it was one of the first things you said. You mentioned you use like jump cut just as a like part of your sentence. I'm like, oh, you're for sure like you're deep into the editing world.
Yeah.
I love it. And then last thing for the episode, just anything you want to shamelessly plug, manifest, anybody you want to shout out.
Ooh, I want to shout out the homies always. I want to shout out the family. I want to manifest, like you said, this is not the first award, that it continues growing. I also want to manifest this is not my last time on this podcast.
Oh, absolutely not.
I'd love to recheck in and compare maybe a year, two. I don't know. But
hey, so you're always welcome on the Banquet Hall podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation and just getting to sit down and talk. I feel like this podcast has also given me a platform just to check in with people. Like obviously this ends up getting posted as a podcast episode, but even if this never got posted, I just got to sit and hear you talk about like things you're passionate about for an hour. Like that means the world to me. And it's just really fun to, just listen to the bright young artist minds that are out there. I really know that our listeners are going to take a lot from this, and I hope that if any of them are interested in sound design or maybe have this passion, maybe they don't even know they have this passion, that they have something that sparks from this episode that gets them to really pursue what they're interested in.
Yeah, definitely. And on that note, if anyone is interested in sound design, also hit me up via contact info on my website and like ask questions. I love, a lot of people help me growing into it, I asked a lot of questions and bothered a lot of people. So please come bother me.
That's what it's all about. We lift as we climb over here. But
Yeah.
thank you, Sal, for your time. Listeners,
you.
make sure you follow the podcast at Banquet Hall Pod. Make sure you check out Suavecito Sound Design, check out his website, stream the music that he's produced, check out a production that he's a part of, go congratulate him on the award, whatever you have to do. Just make sure that we stay invested in our community. Make sure you leave this episode a 5-star rating too. Like Sal gave you all 5-star content, you have to return it with a 5-star rating.
It's a 5-star podcast. Give it 5 stars.
Hey, you heard the man. But thank you, Sal, for your time. Thank you, listeners, for tuning into this episode, and we will catch you next time.